Hey everybody, thanks for coming back to what is probably the final episode of Road to Emporia. We are back in Indianapolis this week, back at work, after going to the Unbound 200 gravel race this past weekend. So it was really great to see everybody out there, everybody from Olympic champions, world champions, monument winners, down to some kids doing their first 25-mile ride. I really enjoy that event. Thanks for coming by and saying hi. Hung out at the expo for a while and got to see all sorts of cool stuff. It's really been great to see all the tech that's coming out. I think we saw a couple different unreleased bikes, wheels, group sets, everything under the sun out there. So it's a lot of fun. And personally, I kind of think that cycling has found their mini marathon, their 5K. I know a lot of people have talked about that for a while. And a participatory event that somebody can go and just do a big hard thing, something to get in shape for. So saw that at the total spectrum of distances and speeds and all that. And then we saw the front of the race get even faster with an unbelievably fast finish. All of that is really exciting to me, and it was fun to be a part of. My takeaway, my goal really was just to finish the race. If I could beat the sun, that would be great, but just finishing the race was my big goal, and I did that. So I ended up coming in maybe 10 minutes before the beat the sun cutoff, so I really couldn't have asked for a much better day, at least results wise. But I kind of wanted to take everybody through and close out this series with a little bit of learnings from my race day, training, all that kind of stuff leading up to it. Really, my biggest change, I think, from my DNF last year was kind of the mindset going into the race. When I started feeling pretty bad about mile 30 last year, and immediately in my head I started thinking, well, I have 175 miles to go, and I can't make it another 175 miles. I talked about that a lot in the last video, where I was just going to shift that mindset to, well, I'm mile 30, I just need to make it to mile 31. Luckily, I didn't have to start doing that until probably there were some really steep rollers about mile 140 or so, and there was an aid station coming up about 150. My feet hurt. I wanted to change shoes, so I just kept telling myself, okay, well, I've got 5 more miles until we can change shoes, 4 more miles until we can change shoes, and then everything will feel a lot better. That was a really big win for me, and really helped make sure that I was getting to the finish line. I also had a little bit more of a regimented pace plan going into it, so that's kind of my second takeaway. I got some advice on Friday night from Rob Britton. I was over waxing some chains and talking with him, and he told me your legs are going to be smoked at some point tomorrow, guaranteed. So when you have the good legs, use them. To a point, I think that was a really good piece of advice. So there were a couple different sections, after Little Egypt, mile 110 to 120, and probably 80 to 100 or so, that I really felt good, and kind of poured it on a little bit more than I otherwise maybe should have. But I think that helped make up a lot of time. Those first 2 hours, I think I averaged way faster than my pacing plan would have been, but I think that was all ended up to a faster time. Maybe a little more pain at the end, but ended up finishing the race a little quicker. So giving myself a little wiggle room on when to push and when to try to conserve, I think that was a really big takeaway that I would definitely say is a good option. So that's really my second learning. My third one was tires. We talked about that a lot in the last video, and I think I was pretty sold on bigger is better, and I couldn't be any more sold, I don't think. So I ran the Pirelli Cinturato H, 45 in the front and 40 in the rear, because that was about as big as I could clear. It blew out to 48 in the front and 42 in the rear, and I ran 22 PSI up front. So that pretty big tire, really low pressure, made the really chunky stuff much more manageable. If I could fit bigger, I would, and I think we saw that on the lifetime podium on the, really the top 10. I think a bunch of those guys were running mountain bike tires on some unreleased bikes. I think we're going to see more of that, and I am really excited to see some really big tire clearance. Bigger really does seem to be better, more comfortable, faster, saving the energy at the end of the day because you didn't just get beat up for the last 13 hours. My third big takeaway really is tires are bigger is better for gravel. My fourth takeaway from the race was my nutrition. So that's something I've been really good at and felt confident in for a while, so I honestly didn't put a whole lot of thought into it. My goal was to do about 120 grams of carbs an hour, somewhere between 100 and 120, and really all I did was pace out how long I thought it would take me to get to each aid station. I filled up enough drink mix in my packs and one bottle, and then one bottle of water between each aid station, and then the math kind of worked out to if I drank the pack and the bottle and took a gel an hour, then I would have enough carb intake to be, totally fine by the end of the day. What I did not take into account is that I think my longest race up to this point was maybe 7 hours, not 14. So it got really hot in the middle of the day, and I no longer wanted to eat anything really, but I definitely didn't want to drink mix. I really was desperate for water, so I ended up stopping at one of the water stops, 115 or something, whenever that was, and dumped out my drink mix and refilled it with water, and that was a big lifesaver. I think what my change would have been is to kind of front load and back load the day with calories and carbs, and at least liquid carbs, and then rely more on gels in the middle of the day. Gels and maybe some bars or something like that, because I needed the water. I think if I were to do that again, that first aid station, I'd probably be picking up a pack full of water and then 2 bottles full of water and rely solely on gels and solid food for the middle part of the day so that I could drink pure water. I think that would have helped a lot. I think I had like 4 gels in the second 100 miles, so my stomach was in a pretty rough spot. I was just trying to get down as much water as I could. I definitely would change some nutrition planning and just take into account the middle of the day heat a little bit better. So end of the day, I ended up feeling pretty wrecked at the last 2-3 hours. Part of that's because it's a 14-hour race, but at least it was for me. And the other part really is just I wasn't eating enough, and I could have made that end of the race a lot more comfortable. My fifth takeaway, probably the most controversial. I don't think the North Course is much harder than the South Course. I think it actually might be easier. Now, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that. I think the chunk was worse, but if you're running bigger tires and lower pressure, especially when you're back not at the pointy end of the race, I think that's a totally different assessment. But when you're back with age groupers and people like me just trying to finish or maybe beat the sun, you're riding by yourself a lot, and those chunky sections really aren't as bad because you can pick a line, you can take a good line, and not really worry about the punctures nearly as bad. The climbs were, I think, a little steeper, but they were way shorter than I remember the South Course being. Maybe it's a little recency bias, but I've probably gone on 4 or 5 rides on the south end of town, and all of the climbs that I had found down there seemed to be a lot longer and more difficult for me. So I don't think people should be nearly as scared of the North Course as it kind of seemed the discourse was indicating. I think my last big takeaway was the training. So I worked with Dylan last year, and he wrote some awesome training plans for me. We talked a little bit kind of the beginning of this year to work through what I was going to do, and working with a coach, one of the things that you're doing is giving them available time, right? The whole point of this series is that I have a full-time job. I have a wife and a son, and now we're going to t-ball practice and swim class, and life has a lot of obligation. giving them available time to train. And I started getting some training rides last year that I ended up having to tell Dylan I just can't fit that time in during the week. So we modified things a little bit, and this year I really planned out to do as much as was physically possible in my schedule. And I think that was a big mistake because something always comes up, something always was around. I think I would have preferred to leave myself a little wiggle room that I could always go ride more. I planned out about 10 hours a week, my biggest week being 16 hours. I ended up completing an average of like 6 hours a week, and I'd never had a week bigger than 11 hours. I think I only hit 10 hours like 3 times. Mentally going into the race, I did not feel very confident in my training, my preparedness, because I didn't prepare like I planned to. And I think if I would have just said that my training was going to be 8 hours a week, I honestly probably would have done more than the 6 hours a week, and mentally I would have been in a lot better headspace. So I think my warning to everybody is don't try to cram your schedule 100% full all the time, because you don't even have a big week to, okay, this is the week that I'm going to put everything else aside and really focus on getting good quality training in this week, because every week is that week when you cram everything full. So, you know, the training I did wasn't ideal, but clearly it was enough. And I would definitely encourage people to give yourself a little latitude with, you know, if you say you're going to train 10 hours and you really probably only have about 8, just go ahead and say 7 or 8. You know, don't try to cram in the every waking moment that you might be able to be on a bike. With that, I beat the sun, finished in just a touch over 14 hours thanks to a great group of 5 or 6 that caught me with 20 miles to go and basically just towed me to the line. Thanks to those guys, I didn't get to catch a name because I was cross-eyed standing at the finish line. So really enjoyed the weekend. I'm already looking for the next event. So if you want to leave a comment, let us know what you think about the series, the bike setup, you know, your experience at Unbound. That's always fun to read. And then maybe what event you'd like to see next. Appreciate you guys following along. It was a lot of fun to check this off my bucket list and bring everybody along for the journey. So we'll see you in the next one.